Imagine you're transported back in time, late 19th century America, a land of booming factories and restless pioneers forging new frontiers. The air crackles with tension as politicians lock horns on one explosive question: should the destiny of the US dollar be tethered to the shimmer of gold? It's a battle that will shape economic fortunes, spark fiery debates across kitchen tables, and even decide the fate of presidencies. But beneath the gilded surface of prosperity lies a hidden struggle, one that escalates into a political showdown so intense it will forever redefine America's place in the global economy. Stay with me to discover how the stroke of a pen on March 14, 1900, unleashed a wave of consequences still felt in your wallet today. Because once we dig past the shining veneer, we find a story of ambition, conflict, and a grand gamble on precious metal that changed the course of American history. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself walking down a busy street in 1899. All around you, industrial smokestacks pierce the clouds, chugging out plumes of progress. Horses and carriages rumble along muddy roads, while electric streetcars clatter on metal rails in bigger cities. Men in bowler hats gather outside banks, reading the latest headlines in newspapers hawked by frantic young paperboys. The nation is growing, prosperous in many places, yet anxious. Why the anxiety? Because amid the progress, the U.S. financial system stands at a precarious crossroads. The dollar can be redeemed in gold under certain conditions, but there's fierce debate about whether the country needs a strict gold standard or if silver should remain part of the currency equation. Politicians warn that fortunes could be made or broken, depending on which path the nation takes. Farmers in the Midwest, reeling from debt, want silver included, so more money can enter circulation. Bankers in New York, hoping to stabilize currency and maintain global investor confidence, demand the unwavering solidity of gold. It's more than just an economic preference. It's a war of ideologies: hard money versus soft money, tradition versus innovation, wealth versus subsistence. By the turn of the century, these tensions have snowballed into a national crisis of faith in American money. Will the government fully commit to gold, or will it continue juggling multiple standards? A decision looms, and everyone from rural homesteaders to robber barons is bracing for impact. But most Americans don't suspect just how colossal that impact will be, because the secret behind the Gold Standard Act isn't just about precious metals, it's about power, national identity, and a promise to the world. The U.S. will emerge as an unshakable economic titan if it can fix its currency to the gleam of gold, or so they believe. Enter the political stage. President William McKinley, whose administration believes economic stability is paramount. In their eyes, gold's purity, scarcity, and universal desirability make it the ultimate backbone for a world-class currency. Then there's the larger-than-life presence of William Jennings Bryan, the great commoner, who passionately champions the cause of farmers, laborers, and anyone who feels crushed under the heel of big industry. Bryan's legendary Cross of Gold speech from 1896 still resonates in people's ears, a powerful condemnation of pinning the American worker to a rigid gold standard. Amid raucous debates in Congress, newspapers fan the flames. Editorials paint gold advocates as guardians of civilization and silver supporters as reckless radicals, or vice versa, depending on the publication's bias. Cartoons showcase Uncle Sam riding a wave of gold, only to crash onto a pile of worthless silver coins. In the corridors of power, men in expensive suits hold hush-hush meetings, strategizing ways to codify the gold standard. Then, the moment everyone's been waiting for arrives. On March 14, 1900, President McKinley signs into law the Gold Standard Act, affirming that only gold will redeem paper money and placing the United States squarely on the gold standard. Thunderclap or whimper, the immediate reaction is a mixture of celebration from bankers and condemnation from those who worry America has just shackled itself to a rigid standard that could strangle the working man. This is more than a signature on parchment. It's a resolution of years of uncertainty, but it also sows new seeds of controversy. Behind the scenes, some see the act as a grand triumph. Now foreign investors can trust the dollar like never before. Others lament that the common people's voices were drowned out by Wall Street elites. At first glance, the Gold Standard Act appears to usher in stability. The dollar's value is fixed to a specific weight of gold, instilling confidence among international trading partners. Bankers exhale in relief, sure that this will reduce wild economic swings. Factories hum, and foreign capital flows in more freely. After all, who doesn't want a piece of a stable currency in a rapidly industrializing nation? Yet for many farmers, miners, and day laborers, life remains a struggle. With silver largely sidelined, they fear that the money supply won't expand enough to meet the needs of a growing populace. If dollars become scarcer, prices might drop, making debt obligations heavier. Imagine being a farmer who borrowed money to buy equipment. Every dollar you owe suddenly becomes harder to come by. For these folks, the Gold Standard Act isn't just a piece of legislation, it's a yoke around their necks. Herein lies the human drama: progress for some, pain for others. But let's take a broader view. This act doesn't merely affect Americans. Global markets watch closely. European powers already trust gold-based economies, and now the United States cements itself in that club. Suddenly, America's financial credibility skyrockets. Tariffs and trade deals look different when you know your trading partner's currency is rock solid. Indeed, the Gold Standard Act helps propel the U.S. into the 20th century as a rising global power, setting the stage for a new era of influence that extends well beyond its shores. To truly grasp the emotional undercurrent, consider personal stories. Meet John Hargrave, a fictional composite of many real-life farmers in the Great Plains. He took on debt during the 1890s to expand his farm, convinced by local banks that silver-based currency would keep interest rates manageable. But now, with the Gold Standard Act, money becomes tighter, and commodity prices waver. John struggles each harvest to scrape together enough to cover interest, praying that weather or market fluctuations don't ruin him. Each new bill from creditors feels like a chain pulling him underwater. Or take Mary Gallagher, working in a textile mill in the Northeast. She sees the upside. Her wage, though modest, is paid in a currency recognized around the world. Inflation isn't roaring out of control, so her meager savings maintain their value. Yet Mary hears the laments of her friends back home in the rural South and wonders if this act, which benefits her stability, dooms them to a life of perpetual debt. The Gold Standard Act's impact isn't monolithic. It's an intricate tapestry of personal triumphs and heartbreaks. And behind every number or statistic looms a human face. People on opposite ends of the debate believe fiercely in their cause. The farmers fighting for silver aren't reckless, they're desperate. The bankers championing gold aren't mere villains, they genuinely see gold as the gateway to respectability and global competitiveness. It's a story of clashing visions for the soul of a nation, with real people caught in the crossfire. But here's a twist most people don't know. The Gold Standard Act wasn't the final word on American currency. Decades later, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took bold steps to abandon aspects of the gold standard, culminating in significant changes by 1933. By 1971, President Richard Nixon declared the U.S. would no longer convert dollars to gold for foreign governments, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. In hindsight, the Gold Standard Act of 1900 is like a stepping stone toward an eventual pivot away from gold altogether. So, if America eventually left the gold standard, did the 1900 legislation even matter? Absolutely. It laid the foundation for how America managed its currency for over 3 pivotal decades. World War I, the Roaring Twenties, and the early years of the Great Depression all operated under the shadow of that gold-centric worldview. Without the Gold Standard Act, America's financial system might have taken a different path entirely, perhaps more reliant on bimetallism, or perhaps accelerating into a fiat system even sooner. This single act shaped the arc of U.S. economic policy, proving that sometimes the laws we enact transform into anchors, steadying or restrictive, depending on your perspective. The early 1900s saw America rising to global prominence, fueled by industrial might and backed by a currency pegged to gold. This alignment with major European powers, like Great Britain, which also used the gold standard, heightened America's standing in international trade negotiations. Ships laden with steel, cotton, and manufactured goods departed from American ports with a confidence that the dollar they were paid in would maintain its worth. Over time, this stability attracted even more investment, which funded new factories, railroads, and later automobiles and airplanes. The synergy of a booming industrial base and solid currency became a cornerstone of America's economic engine. But with great power comes greater complexity. The gold standard constrained how the government could respond to economic downturns. When recessions hit, politicians found themselves wrestling with the strict limitations that gold imposed. Some insisted that it was a necessary medicine, preventing reckless expansion of the money supply. Others argued that it left the nation's poorest to bear the brunt of economic pain without meaningful relief. Thus, the gold standard wasn't just a policy, it became a lightning rod for debate on the scope and responsibility of government intervention in the economy. As America's footprint expanded overseas, imperial ambitions in the Pacific and the Caribbean, for instance, its currency and credibility expanded too. The Gold Standard Act helped broadcast a message. We are a financially sound nation. And for better or worse, that reputation influenced diplomatic relations, trade pacts, and even the American psyche of that era, brimming with confidence and a belief in manifest destiny. It's remarkable how a single legislative decision can intertwine with a country's sense of self. Today, over a century later, the Gold Standard Act still sparks debate. Advocates of gold lament that the U.S. left such a system, pointing to national debt and inflation as signs of an undisciplined fiat money supply. Critics respond that the gold standard was too rigid, turning economic crises into prolonged suffering by preventing flexible monetary policies. So who's right? The answer, as with most historical debates, depends on perspective. But one thing is certain. The U.S. turned a crucial page in its monetary saga on that fateful day in 1900. Modern economists often say that while the gold standard provided stability, it also lacked the adaptability needed to manage modern, complex economies. Others point out that gold's limitations didn't prevent booms and busts altogether. Just look at the Panic of 1907, which rocked Wall Street despite the gold standard. Yet you'll still hear calls from some corners to bring back the gold standard, harnessing that old-fashioned notion of real wealth you can hold in your hand. This enduring controversy is a testament to how deeply the 1900 Act resonates. It forces us to confront big questions. Does anchoring currency to a precious metal truly safeguard prosperity, or does it stifle much-needed flexibility? In a world where trillions of dollars can move instantly across digital networks, the debate might feel nostalgic, but it remains emotionally charged, because it's about trust, faith in government, and the tangible measure of value. Think the Gold Standard Act is just a relic of dusty history books. Consider that every time you swipe your credit card or tap your smartphone to pay, you're relying on a purely digital currency with no gold redemption promise in sight. The transition from the gold-backed dollar to the modern fiat dollar was not a sudden leap, it was a gradual journey, and March 14, 1900, stands out as one of the major turning points in that journey, even though it would later be reversed. If you find yourself shaking your head at modern inflation or marveling at how the government injects trillions of dollars into the economy during crises, you're experiencing the far-reaching echoes of that day. The Gold Standard Act helped define money in the American psyche as something stable and internationally recognized. When the U.S. eventually decoupled from gold, it sparked a profound shift in how the public and policymakers viewed currency. Decades after 1900, Americans had grown accustomed to the idea that the government safeguarded the dollar via gold reserves. Transitioning away from that caused shockwaves. The gold standard question also resonates in discussions about cryptocurrency, where believers claim digital tokens can act like digital gold, providing scarcity and independence from governments. Even though the contexts differ, the underlying debate about who controls money and how it's valued continues. So, the next time someone pitches Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency as the future, think back to that moment in 1900 when the United States pledged its future to a different kind of shiny asset. We can't undo the Gold Standard Act. We can only learn from it. Let this be a call to remember that each economic choice we make has profound, often unpredictable consequences. So if you felt the pull of the past during this journey, don't let it end here. Uncover more stories of currency battles, global conflicts, and the people who lived through them. Check out the links in the description and the pinned comment for deeper dives, recommended books, and thought-provoking essays. And if you believe in preserving history's lessons, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing your thoughts below, because the best way to shape the future is to understand the forces that forged our present.